GOP presidential candidate Ted Cruz won the state of Wisconsin, but Trump is surging in New York. How does this affect the 2016 race, and is a brokered GOP convention in the offing? Former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich joins us. And later, it's been 10 years since the release of his international bestseller, The Book Thief. Now, author MARKUS ZUSAK joins us in a story-oriented segment to talk about the 10th anniversary edition of his work and the power of stories. The World Over Live starts right now.
Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. Newt Gingrich and MARKUS ZUSAK are straight ahead. If you'd like to comment on tonight's show, or if you have a question, I'll be live tweeting throughout. You can find me on Twitter at Raymond Arroyo, or you can email me at worldover@EWTN.com. Here's the brief news from the world over this week. It was a big week for the underdogs in the presidential primaries. Republican Ted Cruz stormed to a commanding victory in Wisconsin on Tuesday. Cruz told cheering supporters at a victory rally that the win was a turning point.
Here in Wisconsin, a state that just 3 weeks ago the media had written off. 3 weeks ago, the media said Wisconsin was a perfect state for Donald Trump. But the hard-working men and women of Wisconsin stood and campaigned tirelessly to make sure that tonight was a victory for every American.
Donald Trump's defeat capped one of the worst periods of his campaign, highlighted by his weaknesses with women voters, an abortion misstep, and further questions about his policy depth. The frontrunner's chances of capturing the GOP nomination outright before the party's convention have narrowed with this Wisconsin loss. And the race for the Democratic nomination took a decidedly negative turn since Bernie Sanders' big win in Wisconsin, the 6th state in a row for Sanders. Hillary Clinton responded with a flurry of attacks against the senator, questioning his truthfulness and policy expertise. And she raised doubts about whether Sanders was qualified for the job. Sanders told a crowd of more than 10,000 people in Philadelphia on Wednesday that he thinks Clinton is not qualified to be president. The next big prize is New York. The primary for both parties will be held there a week from Tuesday on April 19th. More on this unprecedented election season, the latest polls, and that all-important delegate count with Newt Gingrich in our next segment. And in Syria, government troops and local militia have retaken the Christian city of Al-Qaryatain from the Islamic State. The city had been held by ISIS since last August. Most of the Christian population fled after its fall. Outsiders got their first look at the St. Elian Monastery this week. The Assyrian church, which dates back more than 1,500 years, has been mostly destroyed by ISIS bulldozers. Some of the walls were still standing, and much of it has been severely desecrated. Remains were exhumed from grave sites. On a positive note, the relics of St. Elian, which were thought to have been destroyed, were found amid the rubble near the saint's tomb. Father Jacques Marod, the prior of the Syriac Catholic monastic community, reported the discovery of the relics. Meanwhile, Iraq's bishops are cautioning that their country stands at a dangerous crossroads, even as they praised government efforts against ISIS. Following a meeting of bishops on Tuesday, the Chaldean Patriarch issued a statement decrying Iraq's widespread financial corruption and sharp economic decline. They said the bishops are further praying that recent victories by Iraq and Kurdish forces against ISIS might lead to the liberation of Mosul and all of Iraq. Meanwhile, in Washington this week, President Obama reiterated that his administration is making the defeat of ISIS a top priority.
To make sure that we're accelerating the campaign against ISIL in Syria, in Iraq, and we continue to take on their leadership, their financial networks, their infrastructure. We are going to squeeze them, and we will defeat them.
And in Rome, Pope Francis will be traveling to Greece on April 16th and visiting Ground Zero for the European migrant crisis. The Ecumenical Patriarchate of Constantinople, Bartholomew, confirmed rumors that the Holy Father will visit the island of Lesbos in a show of solidarity with the Middle Eastern refugees there. The Greek island, which is just 10 miles off the coast of Turkey, has been a main stopover for more than 1 million migrants from Syria and elsewhere seeking passage to Europe. However, under a new EU-Turkey compact, migrants landing in Lesbos will be returned to Turkey. And back in the United States, religious freedoms have been pitted against gay rights in Mississippi. The state's governor signed a law Tuesday, a bill codifying conscience protections for religious groups, businesses, and individuals working in government. Opponents of the measure suggest that the law would allow the denial of services to gay, lesbian, and transgendered people. Georgia's Republican Governor Nathan Deal vetoed a similar bill last week. This after Atlanta-based companies Coca-Cola, Delta Airlines, and others expressed vehement opposition to the measure, and the NFL threatened to withhold future Super Bowls from the state. And this past week, the Obama administration announced that the abortion drug regimen RU-486 may now be used in the first 10 weeks of pregnancy. That's 3 weeks more than the previous Food and Drug Administration guidelines of 7 weeks. The use of RU-486 accounts for 22% of the more than 1 million abortions performed in the U.S. annually. In addition, its use has resulted in the death of at least a dozen mothers, 50 ectopic pregnancies, and 600 hospitalizations. Head of the U.S. Bishop's pro-life office, Cardinal Timothy Dolan, called the FDA move irresponsible and chided abortion advocates for celebrating the drug's expanded use as it, quote, further opens an ever-widening door to abortion. And next week, the Vatican will host a first-ever conference to re-examine the Church's teaching on just war theory. The symposium is a joint venture by the Pontifical Council for Peace and Justice and the Global Catholic Peace Organization, Pax Christi. As many as 80 experts will convene to rethink the way the Church looks at ethical justifications for war. The just war theory was first referred to by St. Augustine in the 4th century AD and developed more fully by St. Thomas Aquinas, both doctors of the Church. And new developments in the Church's dialogue with the Society of St. Pius X. Pope Francis met informally on April 1st with the head of the society, Bishop Bernard Fillet. It is the first time the two have had an extended or private meeting together. According to a statement issued by the Society, the canonical status of the schismatic group was not directly addressed, but the Pope and Fillet reportedly agreed to continue talks without haste. In an interview just days before this meeting, Bishop Fillet said that he felt that Francis wants reconciliation between Rome and the Society because the Pope has special concern for what Fillet called anything that is marginalized. The Society of St. Pius X broke with Rome in 1988 after its founder ordained bishops without the Holy See's permission, incurring automatic excommunication. Pope Benedict lifted the excommunications in 2009, but the priests and bishops of the Society remain under suspension from ministry. And finally, we are still mourning the death of our dear Mother Mary Angelica. If you haven't been with us recently, Mother died on Easter Sunday and was laid to rest April 1st at Our Lady of the Angels Monastery in Hanceville, Alabama. To honor Mother, the Alabama legislature on Tuesday unanimously passed a resolution that read, quote, in highest tribute to her indelible legacy, she has profoundly impacted others through her compelling studio productions, spiritual talks, and writings. Last week was a difficult week for all of us, and it was an honor for me to be able to anchor Mother's funeral and the associated events, and for our team to remember Mother in a special way with all of you. And I'm very pleased to announce the coming release of the final Mother Angelica book, the sequel to my biography of Mother. It's called Mother Angelica, Her Grand Silence, The Last Years and Living Legacy. It picks up where the biography left off and chronicles Mother's last pain-inflected 15 years. It's a very moving book and maybe my most personal. There's also some real news there. Mother Angelica, Her Grand Silence is available for pre-order now at the EWTN Religious Catalog, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever books are sold. And the Will Wilder book tour rolls on. I'll be in Los Angeles, California at the LA Times Festival of Books at the University of Southern California this Saturday, April 9th. I'm signing books at the Random House booth at 3 a.m. or 3 p.m., not 3 a.m., and speaking at the YA stage at 4:30 p.m. And for those of you in the San Francisco Bay Area, I will be at St. Isidore's in Danville at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, April 12th. I hope you'll come see me, get a copy of Will Wilder, The Relic of Perilous Falls. I may even sign it for you. Can't wait to see you all. Go to RaymondArroyo.com for all the details, and let me know what you think of the book. Write me at Raymond@RaymondArroyo.com. When we return, former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich is here. He'll discuss this perplexing presidential campaign season and much more. The World Over continues in a moment. Stay right there.
During the debate, when he started lecturing me on New York values like we're no good, I've got this guy standing over there looking at me, talking about New York values with scorn in his face, with hatred of New York. So, folks, I think you can forget about him.
Welcome back to The World Over. That was, of course, Donald Trump at a campaign rally in New York on Wednesday, attacking Ted Cruz after losing to him in Wisconsin on Tuesday night. Is the GOP headed toward a compromise candidate or a brokered convention, maybe both? Former Speaker of the House, best-selling author and producer and host of a new special, Divine Mercy, the canonization of John Paul II. Would you welcome back to the show, Newt Gingrich? Great to see you, Mr. Speaker. What do you make of that? I mean, Donald Trump had 15,000 people in that room. There were supposedly 30,000 trying to get in the door.
Well, I mean, New York really is his base. All the polls show him way ahead. The question is, can he sweep, in which case you get 95 or 90 delegates, or does he just do well, in which case you get 60 or 65 delegates? He's going to win. The interesting thing is, actually, the press is not covering this. Kasich's in second place,
right? Not
Cruz.
25%.
I mean, if I were Cruz, frankly, I would skip New York and go to work in Pennsylvania and otherwise, because the New York values thing, which was very cute when he did it,
right,
has now, there was a scene yesterday, I guess, in the Bronx, where people were just all over Cruz, and that ain't gone away. I mean,
no. And Trump keeps
flaming,
pumping the fire there. 226 delegates Trump now has as an advantage over Cruz. He just brought Paul Manafort in, who is an old practiced hand. This is his delegate point man. Isn't this really about gaining those delegates and their true loyalty? Forget who they're committed to in the first ballot.
This is a very important sign that Trump is beginning to understand that this is a hard game, and you can't just do it with rallies. Manafort is a real professional. He handled President Ford in 1976.
Oh, wow.
I mean, which was a very intensely. So he knows how to do this. He's got a big mountain to climb, and he knows it, because Trump really has to win on the first ballot.
Right.
He's not going to gain ground, and so he's got to find that 1237 sometime either by the end of California or in that 6 weeks between the end of the primaries and the time they get to Cleveland.
Making a deal.
Making
a deal with somebody. Do you agree? Pat Buchanan, when we last had him on the show, Buchanan said he doesn't see the possibility of somebody coming in from the outside or any of the. He thinks a deal's going to be made. Do you agree that?
Well, first of all, nobody reads the rules. The rules that the Romney people created in 2012 block anybody else from getting in.
From the outside.
From the outside.
You have to have 8 states,
you have to have
right?
8
have
states,
8 states.
and you have to do it before the first ballot. Because what it says is there'll be multiple ballots in which you will vote for the people who have been nominated. Okay. Now, I think that as a practical matter, there are 2 people who are going to be nominated, Ted Cruz and Donald Trump. There ain't going to be a third candidate. Nobody's going to parachute in magically. And I also think, frankly, the convention is going to pick one of those 2.
They can change the rules, though, as the convention begins.
Except it's the convention delegates who change the rules, not the Rules Committee.
And it's
the
not in
Rules
Cruz or Trump's advantage to do that.
80% plus of the delegates are going to be Cruz and Trump. So why would they change the rules to make it easier to beat them?
Right. I want to show you this. This is Ted Cruz on Tuesday in Milwaukee addressing his supporters. Watch this.
Tonight is a turning point. It is a rallying cry. It is a call from the hardworking men and women of Wisconsin to the people of America. We have a choice, a real choice.
Is this a turning point in your estimation, Newt Gingrich?
No, but I think if I were Ted Cruz, I'd have said that. Look, Cruz had a very good night. He had a better night than anybody expected. He did much better than I thought he would. And so you have to give him some credit. Sure. And I thought he had a very good speech. It was short. It was positive.
Yep.
It brought people together. There's some stuff there that Trump could learn, frankly.
Sure, yeah.
But he now goes to New York. And then he's going to go to Pennsylvania, and he's going to go to Connecticut, and he's going to go to Rhode Island, he's going to go to New Jersey. Those are not places where a Texas evangelical conservative is going to do very well. And then the big final showdown is going to be California.
Yeah, and right now, after being down, Trump is back up. So it seems he's surging
California
again.
is going to be a brawl. I mean,
really?
Because
It's
California,
like a separate country.
California has, I think, 10 votes at large, and all those other delegates, the biggest delegation, all those other delegates are by congressional district.
Oh, boy.
So you can go in and you can pick one in Fresno, and you can pick one over here in San Diego, and it'll be a very, that campaign will almost be a miniature version of the national campaign.
Wow. Is this moment that we're entering now, Ted Cruz defines it as a turning point, is this the final test for Donald Trump? Coming off of a very bad week, that abortion gaffe, the tweeting of the pictures of Ted Cruz's wife, is this his moment to either recalibrate or this thing is going to crumble?
Yeah, look, because she's not going to have any margin for error, and he's got to get 1237 on the first ballot. This is the moment when we're either going to say later on, he had a wake-up call, he responded to it, he gave a series of serious speeches, he came off looking presidential, and people began to relax and say, okay, I can imagine him in the White House. Or he can't do it, in which case I think, frankly, he won't win.
But in head-to-heads, when they poll, Trump opposite Hillary Clinton, Trump loses consistently. The last 12 polls he's been losing.
I don't worry about that.
You don't think that has any merit?
In March of 1980, Ronald Reagan was 25 points behind Jimmy Carter. He beat him by 11. That's a swing of 36. In May of 1988, George H.W. Bush was 19 points behind Michael Dukakis. He beat him by 6. That's a swing of 25 points. So right now we're at a point, and Hillary, frankly, is decaying every week. I mean, she may not get past Sanders.
Yeah.
She has, this New York primary for her is a bigger deal than it is. I mean, if she loses New York, I think it's just over.
I want to play this for you. This is Ted Cruz. This is Donald Trump talking about Ted Cruz. This is the statement he issued right after his loss in Wisconsin. He said, we'll put it up on the screen, Lion Ted Cruz had the governor of Wisconsin, many conservative talk radio show hosts, and the entire party apparatus behind him. He was coordinating with his own super PAC, which is illegal, who totally control him. Ted Cruz is worse than a puppet. He's a Trojan horse being used by the party bosses attempting to steal the nomination from Mr. Trump. Your thoughts on that? A wise statement?
It was stupid. You know, when you get beat, I mean, look, Trump's had a great run. So he loses one. The right thing you do when you lose one, if the base of American sportsmanship is you say, Ted Cruz had a great night, see you in New York.
Right.
That would have been 20 times better. This thing was insulting. It was exactly wrong. And Cruz, I mean, Trump has got to get over this kind of automatic anger and realize that it was a good shtick for a while. It's now over.
Does the abortion gaffe hurt him long term?
No.
He said that women should be...
Because he came back, look, having dealt with Chris Matthews over the years, no rational conservative should ever go on Chris Matthews' show. And Matthews mousetrapped him and got him off into a whole bunch of stuff. He has come back pretty clearly. He's about the same position Reagan had. And I think that he's prepared to say that over and over again as much as he has to.
And does the suggestion, the policy suggestion that he will get Mexico to pay for that wall by holding back those payments that are flying out of our country to Mexico, do those things help him? And the list of the Supreme Court nominees he would appoint?
Now, look, the Supreme Court nominees will really help in a positive way because it's going to say, and I know that they're working on it right now, it's going to say this is a solid conservative list. These are the kind of people who should succeed Scalia. And if you think about 3 or 4 vacancies in the next presidency, this is the kind of court you'd end up with. Conservatives will be very good. I think, remember when he talks about Mexico, this is the guy who wrote The Art of the Deal. Now, what he's setting up is we are going to build a wall, which I personally agree with, and we're going to get Mexico to pay with it, and here's one way to do it. And now that's the start of the negotiation. I don't know quite what deal he's going to cut with Mexico once he's president, but he's serving notice to Mexico that with a $58 billion trade deficit, with us sending billions of dollars down there every year, some of it from people who are here illegally, that there are ways to get the money. And I think, I also think, by the way, if Trump builds it, it'll be much cheaper than the U.S. government thinks. Because every time Trump's taken over a government project, he's done it for 20% of the cost.
Well, he's going to turn it into a hotel before long. There'll be views of both sides of the border.
Little Trump bungalows.
Here, along the way, dotting the top of that very high wall. I want to play this for you. This is Bernie Sanders responding to Hillary Clinton's criticisms that he's not qualified to be president. Here's what he hit her with.
I don't believe that she is qualified if she is through her super PAC taking tens of millions of dollars in special interest funds. I don't think that you are qualified if you get $15 million from Wall Street through your super PAC. I don't think you are qualified if you have voted for the disastrous war in Iraq.
Clinton has lost 6 of the last 7 states to Sanders. There is an indictment pending of Hillary Clinton. Is this the beginning of the end? It would seem that she's got this thing locked up.
It could be. I mean, she's going to lose her 7th state Saturday in Wyoming, where Sanders will beat her. This is also just a reminder that I always tell people when you get to a certain level, you have to be able to dance. It's a little bit like being a jazz musician. And Hillary can't dance. She reminds me of Kim Kardashian when Prince threw her off the stage because she couldn't dance. The fact is, she picks a fight with Bernie. He comes back and hammers her. I mean, if you are a left-wing Democrat, everything Bernie just said is so much more powerful emotionally than anything Hillary's saying. That he's on a roll, and he's also now built this money machine where he has well over 1 million people who send him $27 at a time. People don't think about this. 1 million people sending in $27 is $27 million. That's a big fundraiser.
I'll say. Now, 1 in 4 Sanders supporters say they will not support Hillary. Do you think that's just them speaking now out of loyalty?
Well, there's always a pattern of people saying, I won't support that other person. But I do think she loses among young people by such huge margins. I think in Wisconsin that Bernie got 82% of the people under 30. 82%.
Wow.
Now, what that says to me is that the Republican nominee, if they get the right messages and if they use the right social media, may be surprisingly competitive compared to Hillary Clinton, if Hillary can get to the nomination, which I think she certainly is the front runner, but she has really big weaknesses. And we'll see in New York. If she loses New York, I think that her campaign is on its last legs.
Wow. Let's talk about you for a moment, and we'll come back to all of this some other time. What are you working on now? Tell me the latest projects.
Cliff and I are very excited. As you know, we just did Divine Mercy, which was on
just aired it
on EWTN. It's a beautiful, beautiful tribute to both John Paul II and John the 23rd. We have a new edition of Rediscovering God in America coming out next month. All this is at gingrichproductions.com. We have a movie about George Washington, which will premiere at Mount Vernon. We're very, very excited by it. And of course, Callista has volume 6 of Ellis the Elephant, teaching 4 to 8, and you know this because you've had it for your own family, but teaching 4 to 8-year-olds about American history. This new one will be the president's. It's called Hail to the Chief, and it comes out this fall.
Oh boy, you will never stop.
I know, we just plug away.
I'll say, and novels, and it's constantly coming. Newt Gingrich,
great to be with you.
Thank you as always for being here. As you heard, Newt's got projects galore coming. Divine Mercy, the canonization of John Paul II, hosted by Newt and Callista Gingrich, is available at gingrichproductions.com. When we return, New York Times best-selling author of The Book Thief, Markus Zusak, is up next. We'll talk about great storytelling, what inspires his writing, and how to get your kids to pick up a book when the world over continues. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome to our story-ended segment, where we talk to some of the world's great authors about their works. The Book Thief was first released in 2005, and it spent 375 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. In 2013, an adaptation of the book starring Geoffrey Rush packed theaters. The Book Thief continues to move young and older readers. Now, a special edition has been released, an anniversary edition. I recently sat down with the author, Markus Zusak, to discuss his life and career, what stories he's currently working on, and those that have shaped and influenced his work. Markus, let's start with what compelled you to write this story 10 years ago. Where did it come from?
It just came from my childhood, really, growing up hearing the stories of my mum and dad. They grew up in Germany and Austria during and after the Second World War, and they just told us these amazing stories that were, devastating and beautiful and sometimes funny, because they just told us about their childhoods, and they were great storytellers. So I grew up hearing about cities that were burning while the ground was covered in ice. I heard about kids who gave bread to Jewish people and other so-called criminals, on their way to concentration camps, and just kids doing quite amazing things. And I thought, I'm going to write a 100-page novella about that, and it turned into a 500-page book that meant everything to me. So now, I've been lucky.
And tell me, when I first read this book, it had to be 8 or 9 years ago, probably 10 years ago when it first came out. I've always thought this is about a little girl, Liesl, who is really, she's preserving a piece of the world. She's preserving the best part of the world through words, through these books and pages that she's able to preserve. Give people a sense of where that character came from, and what does it mean to you all these years later, reading this story, reading Liesl's story?
Yeah, well, Liesl just was a natural piece of my imagination. And when I talk about writing the book from my parents' stories, it was like scratching something open in your mind, reaching in and pulling that world out, or waking up one day and realizing you can speak another language.
Yeah,
that's what it was like, and that was my first research. And all these years later, when I think about what the book is about, I think about there was a world where Hitler destroyed people with words and propaganda, and here was a girl who's stealing the words back, and she's writing her own story through the story of Nazi Germany, and hopefully it's a beautiful story written amongst that ugly world.
There is something powerful, I think, in the telling and novel. Death is the narrator of this book, and I know you wrestled back and forth. You tried it in the voice of death, then you tried it in Liesl's voice, then you tried it a third person, and you went back to death as the narrator. Why?
Well, I think people think that writers have great imaginations, and it's a sort of whimsical idea of these, you get bursts of inspiration, but we don't have great imaginations, we just have a lot of problems.
A stumble in the darkness?
Yeah, that's right.
Shh, don't tell them. You're ruining the whole mystique.
Exactly, I know. It's that idea, though, that necessity is the mother of invention. And the problem I had with death was originally he was too dark and macabre, too typical of death.
Yeah.
And then I went to Liesl, my new problem despite my German and Austrian background, was I now had the most Australian-sounding German girl in the history of books. And so I arrived back at death when I thought, what if it was just a little to the left or right of what I was doing before? And he's actually afraid of humans. He's actually afraid for us. And he's always finding humans at our worst. So he's going to try to write a story or tell a story about humans being beautiful and worthwhile and selfless, and that's why he's telling Liesel's story.
No, it's compelling, and of course the friendships, the foster parents that she finds in the course of this story, who really teach her to read and foster this impulse she already has.
Yeah, I'm really impressed. You've really read the book.
What do you think? I'm lying to you? Yeah, I've read the book.
No, I know that. But, you know, sometimes you can tell when someone's saying, oh,
Well,
what's your book about?
What's the book about? Tell us about death. This is set in Germany.
Yeah, that's right.
Did you have any hesitation, because there's been so much written about the Holocaust, any hesitation about writing in that genre, in that world?
I think I was still a kid when I started writing it, in writing terms. I mean, I think I was 26 or 27 when I started writing the book, and I didn't think of it that way.
You didn't realize the implications it could have or not.
Yeah, it was the old adage of being a writer that the first thing you do is you write what you know. Yeah, even if you're writing a science fiction novel, you're still writing about yourself. And so I just wrote about the stories I knew. If my parents were Portuguese or Mexican or whatever, I would have been telling those stories. And so I never put it into a category, ever. And that's how it became the book it did.
The Book Thief was released as an adult book in Australia.
Yeah.
In the United States, it was released as a YA, young adult book.
Yeah.
Did that shift at all the perception of this work, and did it change at all the way you saw it afterward, when it became such a worldwide hit?
Well, I thought this would be my least successful book. I thought it would sink without a trace because, you know, I imagine someone trying to recommend it to their friend and the friend says, well, what's it about? You know, and you say, well, it's set in Nazi Germany, it's narrated by death, nearly everyone dies, you know, and it's 500 pages long, you'll love it.
Yeah.
And, you know, so I honestly, you know, and not to be too glib about that, but I just didn't even think of it as a book for adults or kids, and because I didn't think it would be successful. And I think once you let go of that, and you let go of the idea of audience, and you would know yourself being a writer that suddenly you're free. And I know with that book, I see faults in it and all sorts of problems, but I know that it couldn't be accused of being unambitious or that it didn't have any ideas in it. And so I forgot about audience, and that's what made it the book it became.
Yeah, and it's also a book I read in an interview you gave once, and you said you should write the book that scares you, the book that you're not sure you can finish.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard all sorts of writers speak over the years, and you have very professional writers who do say things like, well, I'm a professional, not an amateur. I only start books I know I can finish.
Right.
And I sort of think, oh, I'm happy to be an amateur because it's the idea that I always want to write above myself, and I want to start books that I'm not sure I can finish because then you're in your discomfort zone and you know how that gets the best out of you. So that's what I'm hoping for each time.
Well, this is our story-entered segment, which is a literary segment we do once a month on the show. We have a few emails, and a little girl wrote in. Her name is Susan, and she asked, how did you get into the mind of a little girl to tell Liesel's story? She found that odd, that it was a man writing Liesel's story.
Yeah, well, I can say to Susan, it was just a natural progression because it was so vividly put to me by my mum growing up in that time. I could see it all, and I never thought of a boy being the main character. It was always Liesel, and she was sort of a tomboy in a lot of ways, and she was a tough kid and really resilient, and so it was very close to my heart, so it just came naturally.
Did you have problems finding her voice? I mean, when the entire book was going to be in her voice?
I did, and maybe that was also one of the things that steered me back to death. It's as another writer friend of mine said to me, you just do what you can get away with. And
now that's a great line.
It is.
And true.
And so maybe I got to Liesel's voice through the guise of death. And you know, when it's death, you can almost all bets are off.
Do you write background? I do these long folders, and I'll do background and biography. And how do you do that with a character like death?
Well,
Did you?
The way I plan a book is by essentially writing chapter headings over and over again, and that's how I structure things. And it's almost mathematical in a way. But then what happens is, like, that's a 10-part book, and something you think, a chapter that's going to appear in part 4 ends up being shifted all the way back to part 7.
Right.
Because the story grows around you no matter how well you plan it.
That's true. I want to ask you some questions that I ask all authors when
Sure.
they're here.
Getting
These are
scared now.
rapid fire. Get ready. And
right.
there is a trapdoor in the floor if you don't like these answers. Favorite children's book?
It's got to be Green Eggs and Ham.
Why?
I love the cheerfulness of Sam I Am, and just that he's called Sam I Am. You know, I do not like them Sam I Am.
Now, you had multiple editions of Dr. Seuss in your house, in different languages.
Well, yeah, in German as well, and it's all been sort of appropriated and changed, and you wonder how you get the rhyme
Right.
and the silliness
schema, yeah.
through that, and also. So yeah, we had those books as kids. We had large volume.
Why did you have multiple
I think my mum
versions in languages?
my mum and dad were really conscious of the fact that they couldn't speak English when they came to Australia, so they wanted their kids to be really good readers. And
I see.
without really pushing it on us, but when I was 4, I used to eat Dr. Seuss books. I'd just chew on the corner. You know,
I still chew on those. They're
quite a good
very
diet.
tasty. Yeah, they're very good. What is your least favorite book? Doesn't have to be a children's book.
Well, I can say that it's The Book Thief, and it's the book I'm working on now, because you go through writing a book and you just can't stand the sight of it, and everything in it is terrible. And you've read it, that you know, and every full stop is like a giant rock you've got to climb over. And so you know what writing's like. You're sitting there half the time going, "Geez, I'm worthless."
You do feel
You know,
that.
I'm pathetic. You know, and I'm lazy.
Until
And-
the audience embraces it, and then you say, I was brilliant. It was perfect, right?
Well-
I mean, there's a day of that, and then you're back to, I'm miserable. This is never working. I shouldn't do this."
That's right. Oh, well, you get a review that picks up one. It says 10 beautiful things about the book and one little thing
Right to the heart.
Yeah, that criticises it, and that's what you'll remember.
Yeah.
And, but they found that one little thing that you might have been unsure about yourself.
Before I go back to our rapid fire questions, what did you learn about yourself? Because I find in the writing, you do learn about things in your memory, perceptions you had that you perhaps didn't even realize, and they work their way out in the writing. What did you discover in The Book Thief about yourself, about you?
I think just how much stories mean to me. And I think I'd learned that stories essentially are what we're made of. And I mean, there's DNA and there's physicalities and things like that, but if you take stories away from us, we don't actually have anything.
What was the story that helped you find your way in life, your path? And what lessons did it leave you with?
In this case, I'd probably have to go for S.E. Hinton's The Outsiders when I was 14, and it made me want to be a writer. And some of her other books did too. The difference was she was 16 and wrote a book. I was 16 and wrote 8 pages that could be entered into a competition for the worst book ever written. But you grow, and then you try again, and then you write a book that doesn't get published. And then you write your next book, which you don't send off because you know it was too much like the first one. And finally, you know, you may get there, but you start writing thinking that you may never get published, but you do it anyway.
Where do you write and why?
I write in my office at home or my room, but it's always open. My kids come in. I've got an old typewriter on this thing, and they just come in and bash away at
the keys.
I like a bit of chaos as well until I yell at them and tell them to get out.
Then slam and lock the door.
That's enough. And I also like to write I like to edit in the kitchen, and I like to feel like it's near me. You want to wake up in the morning and feel like the story's close to you.
Where do your best ideas come from?
Where?
Where?
They come from working. They come from sitting down at the desk, and that's where you're working on part 7 or chapter 3, and you'll get an idea for that first chapter that you just couldn't crack when you were there, and then you go back and fix it. Where I don't get my best ideas is walking along the beach.
No.
That's when you worry about your taxes and everything. You know, you actually, it's like if someone said to you, how do I become a better runner? You don't say, go for a walk on the beach and think about running.
But
You
part of
sit
it
down
is
and
part of it
or you
is
run.
scavenging, though, isn't it, Marcus? I mean, part of it is observing, seeing the quirks, or hearing that little lilt in the voice and wanting to capture that. I mean, that observation is important, isn't it?
It is. I mean, and it's the collection of all those things through your life, and that's how most people's first books are essentially kind of their life.
Yeah, yeah, or in some, or refashioned in some way. If you could appoint a writing mentor, dead or alive, who would it be?
I tell you what, it wouldn't. Well, he was a writer as well, but I wouldn't mind Michelangelo as a mentor.
Oh,
Although he'd be pretty strict.
and a little quirky around the edges if those biographies are to be believed.
That's true,
Yeah,
but
he
I
was a
tell you what,
character.
I mean, there'd be a work ethic.
Yeah, that's true. There was a great. I mean, he was amazing. Look what he did.
Not to mention genius. I'd be. I'd have to take that back. I think I'd feel too worthless all the time.
What advice would you give parents trying to get their kids to read? What's the best advice that you've used in your own family?
Well, the first thing I would say is start before reading, and don't be afraid to tell your kids the same stories twice or 3 times or 4 times, because that's how they learn them and that's how they love them. And so first for me, it's the love of story as opposed to even a love of books. The other is to be seen reading yourself. And I remember even when I used to go to high schools, and I still go to high schools sometimes, and they used to say to the PE teacher, can you just, that the English department would say, oh, can you just carry that book as you walk through the playground, so that the kids just see you with the book.
Yeah.
And there's no point, and I often tutored kids, and every now and again there'd be parents who'd tell their kids to read, but then they'd buy them a PlayStation.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with having a PlayStation or whatever it is, but you know, it's good to have the books around the house. For us, it was always visible, and so you're showing your kids that
I think
it's
you've hit
important.
it. That love of story. We all love story. In our souls, we love and yearn for stories.
Yeah.
And I think if you hook them into a story or a character that they're attracted to, there's no stopping them.
Kids are voracious when it comes to that, and what I've noticed as well, like speaking in schools, like, and you get, and in public appearances and things like that, you've told the story that many times, you start to feel guilty, and then there'll be some kid or someone who puts their hand up, and in my case, I'd always had this story about getting revenge on my brother. It's a whole story about eggs and things like that, and someone will ask, can you tell that story? And I think, aren't you sick of that story? But we love to, that's why, you know, we love to watch the same movies over and over again when we really love them.
Well, I would argue parents were asking me at a recent school visit, well, my son, he all he wants to do is sit there and play his Xbox all day. And he keeps going back to it. I said, sit with him, as I did with my teenager, sit with him for a little bit and find out why. These are well-made stories in many cases.
Yeah.
The gaming, you almost do the game to get to the next cliffhanger or the solution. Somehow we've got to work that into books to get them on that same conveyor belt with that same hunger.
Yeah, I often look at it, and I've often explained it as books are just tougher.
Yeah,
you know,
I
people
agree.
think, oh, books, you know, that idea of, you know, especially for boys, because when you're a young male writer, as I was once, you know.
You've got another month and a half. You're okay, Mark.
5 minutes maybe.
That's right. We'll time you out.
Yeah, but I used to say that, you know, it's all good and well to point out education and things like that as, you know, up against sport is not necessarily masculine things to do, but reading's a tougher thing to do because you've got to do some work. You've got to do a bit of work to get into it, and it's there to test you a little bit, but the rewards are greater.
I agree.
And, you know, a loved book, when you really love a book, it really can mean the world to you, and it can change your life more readily than anything else.
I agree. No, it's a friend. It's a passport to the world, to a world you may never
Absolutely.
visit or know.
And that old adage from To Kill a Mockingbird that you don't know someone until you've walked around in their skin.
Exactly.
And the idea of empathy there is so important.
No, books teach us so much. Final question. There are 2 classifications of writer. There are gardeners and there are architects. Which are you, a gardener or an architect as a writer?
I'd probably have to go for architect.
Really?
Well, because
Can you outline?
yeah, I like to build, and I like to have a structure that I'm inside of that I've got to have a very good reason to step out of. Yeah. And in a way, that constriction is freeing because you feel safe.
I agree.
And then you can, so that's why you can count the chapters in The Book Thief, and there are 8 chapters in each of the 10 parts, and it's all worked out in that particular way.
Mm-hmm. No, there's a safety in that. And then, as you were saying earlier, once you're cozy and safe in this structure, you can maneuver and let the story tell itself.
Yeah, that's right. And if you have to build another house, you do that.
Yeah, you build another house. I'm glad you built the one you built. Looking forward to reading The Bridge of Clay. Where is that now?
Oh,
You've been working on this book for a long time.
Yeah,
Marcus.
it'll come out sometime this century, I hope. It's been a rough ride, but I think that's there to test you as well. I think writing is always a measure. It's always asking you, how much do you want it? Mm-hmm. Right down to when you were unpublished. You just got to keep getting up all the time.
No, it never gets easier, really. You're still fighting the words at every turn. They don't know that. They just go on the fun ride. But we sit there anguishing and bleeding over those pages.
Of course, but, it's often said, if everyone, if it was easy, everyone would do it.
I agree. Well, I'm glad you did it. Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure.
The special anniversary edition of The Book Thief by Markus Zusak is available now at bookstores everywhere and online. And be sure to follow our literacy program, Storyented. Tell us which stories changed your life. We're at storyented.com. And if you impress us, we might send you a signed edition from one of our featured authors. And as we always say, find your story, find your way. Well, that is all the time we have. Until next week, the show continues on Facebook and Twitter. Like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter. The links are at RaymondArroyo.com. You will not want to miss next week's show. The Papal Posse returns. Robert Royal and Father Gerald Murray will be here to discuss Pope Francis's exhortation on the family. Plus, best-selling author and radio host Bill Bennett will be here to discuss his latest book, Tried by Fire, the story of Christianity's first 1,000 years. Until then, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thank you for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo from Washington, D.C. We'll see you next time. Bye now.